Welcome back, everybody, to our first podcast after our little hiatus over the summer. We're back with St. Joseph's Workshop. It's Andrew, Alan, and Jason here with our friend Steven. Jason, why don't I'll just toss it to you real quick and you just kind of introduce our guest to see.
Sure. Thanks, Drew. Welcome back, everybody. I hope everybody got to get a chance to go through the 30-day Novena of the St. Joseph Cloak as we all had summer vacation. And so as we were going on summer vacation, we thought about collectively as a team to think about some financial advisory and how we could, as men, save for ourselves and also for our future, whether that be a vocation of marriage or a vocation of a single life, but to protect our wealth. And so our friend Steven, who's a financial advisor, we thought we'd bring him in and give us some knowledge on how to do that. So welcome, Steven. Thanks for being part of the podcast, and please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me on. So my name is Steven Colantuono. I grew up in Rhode Island. I did 5 years in the United States Marine Corps. Recently moved down to Green Lawn, New York with my wife. And so when I was younger, I had an interest in, a little bit of investing. Personally, through Robinhood is the app that I was using for a little while, and decided to start my own practice doing financial advising. Now that I'm in New York, kind of found a home doing that. Just looking to get things moving along.
Awesome. And so what are some of the products that you specialize in, Steven?
So the big thing is life insurance is the biggest product. A lot of people don't realize the tax advantages of a permanent life policy. So when they learn those, that's a big deal for a lot of people. Then we also deal with sponsored employee-sponsored programs, 401ks, 403bs, 457s, things like that. That people. It is important to use those if your employer offers those, especially if they match. Mm-hmm. That is, those are important financial vehicles. Also things like mutual funds, ETFs, if you're more of an individual investor starting to get into it, those can be a good ways to start investing. They help you diversify easily. IRAs, of course, Roths, 529s for college planning. These are all important financial vehicles.
You mentioned ETFs. I've heard that. What is that?
It's an exchange traded fund. So similar to a mutual fund, where it's a group of assets that's put together into a fund. Mm-hmm. So they can be either in a sector. So you have in the financial sector or a real estate sector, where they'll just be focused on assets in that sector, or they can be split up into multiple sectors. So you'll have some of the stocks in tech, energy, the financial services, real estate, healthcare, utilities. So that's why I like them to diversify, because they're also, as with mutual funds, they're managed. So you typically have an active manager, which you have fees from that, but you know that the fund is being taken care of. ETFs, some of them are more actively managed now. They're traditionally not actively managed, but it just gives you a good way to diversify.
Yeah, it's like you want to make sure too that you're investing in an ETF that's going to have long-term profitability, right? Because especially, I certainly saw the past couple of years, we've seen a lot of ETFs that went up, went down, and so on.
You can get into inverse ETFs and stuff like that if you want to get more complicated.
So I think Alan brings up a good point here about long-term wealth and long-term, conserving your hard-earned money. How do we do that, and what do you recommend on how to preserve our wealth, not just for ourselves, but for our families, and when we decide to get married, or even if we don't get married and we have a niece or a nephew or a sister or a brother that we could leave our wealth to. How does one are able to preserve our wealth?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to do it. It depends on what your goals are or what you're looking to do. So I think you brought up, so like for a niece or nephew or one of your children or something like that, if you wanted to start at 529 so they can get ready to go to college. The great thing about 529s is that with a lot of college funding vehicles, they only allow you to use the money for tuition. With 529s, you can use it for anything that has to do with higher education. So dorms, supplies, books, things like that. You can also use the money on. I did bring up life insurance policies earlier. With a permanent life policy, so you can have universal life policies that are vested in the market. You can have whole life policies that accrue money differently, either through interest or dividends. And these can be a great way to accrue money for a kid to use for college as well, because you can take that money out, the cash value out of a permanent life policy, and use it for whatever you want, tax-free, whenever you want.
So, I'm recently married, thought about life insurance, but I looked on my benefits and I see that I have life insurance through my company and long-term and short-term disability. Why should I buy a whole term or a term life insurance policy from somebody outside of my company when I'm provided that through my company?
So the biggest issue would be if you, for whatever reason, were to leave that job or lose that job, you typically don't get to keep any of those benefits. The other thing is with like a life insurance policy through the job, it's usually only like 2 to 3 times your income. You just have to think about where you are in life. So if you have children, 2 and 4-year-old or something like that, if something happens to you, is 3 times your income going to be enough to take care of that kid until they're ready to move on with their life? Probably not.
Right. So it would make more sense to discuss some of that life insurance framework with you to help solidify, even if I lose my job or move to another job, I still always have that even when I retire. Because if I retire from that company, I think what I understand from it is that I don't get to keep that. So I've been paying that all that time, and when I retire, I still don't have life insurance policy. Is that true? Is that how that works?
Exactly. Typically when you're going to retire, that might not be the biggest, worry that you don't have life insurance. It might not be something you need unless if you have, a spouse and you have a mortgage, so you want to make sure that something doesn't happen, that they lose the house if you just moved or something like that. At that point, typically the children are out of the house, so you're not as worried about taking care of them. It would just be with the life insurance, leaving them a little something when you pass away. But before that is really the big issue, where typically policies through the employer just aren't going to be enough.
Right. And so I know there's a generally companies just offer like a term policy, and I know that you and I have spoke previously, and you've talked about a whole term life policy. So if you could explain the difference between what a term policy, and a whole life policy for our viewers, I think that might help them understand the value and the importance of life insurance outside of the organization that they work for.
Yeah, absolutely. So term policy is essentially like renting. You're putting money into the policy just in case something happens. That policy isn't building cash value. It's just there if something happens to go wrong, it's there to protect your family. With the whole life policy, it's there for your whole life, as the name suggests. So you're putting money into it, and it's accruing cash value, like putting equity into a home. So it's like owning a home. So you can use that cash value that's in the policy whenever you want, tax-free for whatever reason. And then you also have the added benefit of, if something happens to you, your family is going to have the money from the death benefit there.
So the whole life is almost like a savings account.
Exactly.
Okay.
And term it's generally cheaper because
Yes.
it's a term.
Exactly.
The whole life's a little bit more expensive to what Andrew was alluding to, that it's like a savings account.
At least initially, term is going to be cheaper. So if you were to do this when you were young, the insurance isn't going to be as much, obviously, because life insurance is based off of your health and your age. And then with a whole life policy, because it's going to be there for your whole life, it's typically more expensive, and you're also accruing the cash value inside the policy.
So the term life it's kind of like a subscription service you would get nowadays, like Netflix or something, where you're paying into it. Maybe you need to use it because God forbid something happens to you. But I mean, if you don't use it, then if at some point, like 40 years down the road, you drop that policy, you don't get anything back.
Exactly, you get nothing back.
Okay.
Right.
But with that's the good thing about getting a term policy when you're younger is that you can convert that policy into a whole life policy.
Oh, really?
And typically with most companies, they're going to give you conversion credits, so you're going to get a little bit of money put into the whole life policy
That's
afterwards.
nice. I didn't know that. Okay.
Cool. So I think for our young listeners, I mean, we've kind of said a lot about life insurance, and I think most people, when you're 21 or you're going to live forever. But as you know, as a financial advisor who's given out life insurance policies, as one gets older, it gets more expensive. Now, would you recommend somebody who's young and can do it to get a whole life policy? And would it generally be cheaper because they are younger?
It will definitely be cheaper, yes. If you have the extra money to put into another vehicle to start some savings, I would definitely recommend some sort of permanent life policy. You can look at the differences between whole life and universal life. There are some differences. Like I said before, with universal life, you can be vested in the market, so you can even get a much greater return. There's just universal life has some other quirks to it, but they're both very good options.
Awesome. And since we're on the younger path, what do you recommend? Earlier you alluded to 403bs and 401ks, and what is the recommendation of starting? We sometimes we start out at a job, and we're not making much, and people are like, oh, I can't afford it. What do you recommend from a percentage wise, or just not even from percentage wise of the value of putting into your retirement in your 401k or for your 403b? What do you advise a young person? Because everybody likes to take a big paycheck home, and they're afraid that they might not have enough money if they invest in that.
Yeah, it can certainly be a concern for some people, but the most important thing is to just get started, whatever you can do. And especially with the employer sponsored plans, if they give you a match, just hit the match. You're getting free money. You're going to start building the interest inside of these policies, and that's going to earn you even more interest. Compound interest is what that's known as. It's just going to help you save faster, is what it comes down to.
Yeah, I heard something where like if you start at a younger age, you actually end up making $1 million more if you start out when you first get hired investing in your 401k than if you start at a later date. I mean, I don't know if this is true, but I've heard this a long time ago, but I'm pretty sure it makes sense because the ketchup is not the ketchup you put on your hamburger.
No, but the difference can be tremendous because, like I said, you're getting interest on top of interest. So if you start saving earlier, you get that extra cash that's in that policy already, and it's just building on itself.
Right. Were we on time? Because we can edit all this.
Oh, we're fine. I mean,
We're good?
Yeah.
Think it's enough?
Did we ask all the questions?
Think so.
I got one more, and this is something that all of us could probably speak to or answer, so we don't necessarily have to put it all in. But, so when I was younger, maybe for you guys too, I don't know, but when I was younger and I was working like low-paying jobs and stuff, there was like this myth in my head of like, oh, there's no real value in saving anything or investing in anything because this is such a pittance anyway. It's not going to go anywhere. I mean, what would you guys say to that kind of thinking?
I think that even starting, what I tell my students actually is even starting $50 a paycheck, which is like $100 a month, the earlier they do it, because the compounded interest is going to pay them many dividends. And so, like, if somebody at 18 or 19 can scrap together $50 every 2 weeks, put it into like a Roth IRA or something like that, they may not see the value of it now, but in 20, 30 years' time, they'll be incredibly thankful for it.
Take a day off from Starbucks every once in a while and just put that money away.
That's great. Yeah, that's great.
I think that people, you see stock prices and you say, well, I can't afford that. But I think, Steve, you alluded to earlier, like Robinhood, you could buy a half a share. Mm-hmm. And guess what? Once you own a half a share of a stock that pays a dividend, they're going to pay you the dividend. So even though it's a quarter of a penny, there was a story I read in the Wall Street Journal. So I think, Drew, to your point, yes, it does. It is important because it doesn't matter the amount of salary that you make. There was a story that I read in the Wall Street Journal a long time ago that an environmental custodian, which I think is the politically correct term for janitor, but I'm not trying to be funny.
It's hard to keep up with.
I know. We need to find an investor that knows how to keep up with that stuff. That he just kept dollar cost average in buying these companies that paid dividends, and it was like Exxon Mobil, Macy's, these big conglomerates, and the guy died with over like $40 million.
Really?
Yeah. On just like, and
so he had automatic reinvest.
Yeah. And he had, right. And it was like the craziest story. And it was just like, and so, I think earlier we were having this conversation about capitalism. That's capitalism. You can't do that in communism. You can't do that in socialism. You can't do that in Marxism. You can't do it in fascism. Mm-hmm. But in a free market capitalistic society, the environmental custodian who makes $18 an hour could die with $40 million by investing properly.
And people get a bad taste in their mouth about the stock market sometimes. All you're doing is investing in a company. That's all you're doing.
Yeah,
when you buy these stocks. Right.
So you can do it, if your concerns are ethical, you can do your research and find the right.
There's plenty of ethical there's plenty of ethical mutual funds out there.
Exactly.
I think Capstone was one that is a very conservative or they're not into the sex, drugs, alcohol, tobacco, like all that stuff.
Well, last year you introduced me to Acorn.
Yes.
Is that what it's called?
Yes.
Acorn. It's just this app that basically rolls over like $5 a week and $5 a paycheck into an account. They invest it for you. They have kind of like a preset portfolio. But for our listeners out there that are newbies like me, that's a great way to get started.
Yeah, it's like having a managed account.
Yeah.
And then they just take it, they do it for you. And I think what you're saying is key is to have something too that's automatically deducted every month or or bi-weekly, whatever it is. And so that way too, you don't have to make a decision, and your quotidian expenses don't get in the way. And you don't even see it. You don't even know it's going there.
So in a way, you don't miss it.
Right.
You don't because it's not there from the beginning.
Right.
That's why the employer sponsored plans are a good one, because it just comes right out of your paycheck.
Right.
You don't even know.
You're not sure what you mean. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. And sometimes it's before they're taxed, right?
Yes.
Right.
And that's beautiful, because a lot of times people don't realize how that pre-tax retirement investment is really a major source of income for a lot of people, not immediately, but later on.
Yeah.
Yes,
absolutely.
Definitely.
Well, good. And so I think that, I don't know, Steve, we didn't ask you sort of the big picture. What do you think that St. Peter's going to talk to you about when you talk to him about your career here in financial investment? How do you see your work?
Hopefully, if I did my job right, which it's all about doing the right thing for the client, then I'll be all set with him, if that's what I did. And I just did the best thing for the people that I work with.
Well, I know you, Steve, and you're going to do the best thing for the people, and that's what's important.
You got a servant's heart, man.
Yes, he does. And so, I think at the end of the day, Drew's going to take us home.
Well, yeah. So For all of us, for everyone listening out there, if you guys are interested in the financial products that Steve's been talking about, we're going to have his contact info in the show notes for this episode. So you guys can reach out to him. He can help you out, work with you guys to figure out what suits you best. So with that, we're closing this episode. Stay tuned for our next one coming up. And St. Joseph, pray for us.
Pray for us.
Good night, folks.